Depending on what sort of work you need to accomplish in Linux, you may need to transfer files between computers. Since you will frequently only have access to a remote computer using a command line shell, knowing how to transfer files using only the command line is important. In this video, we will discuss two commonly used utilities to transfer files, SCP and rsync. The first utility is SCP, which is short for Secure Copy. It copies files across the network using the encrypted SSH protocol. To securely copy a file from our local computer to another, remote computer, you can use the following command. The format of the command is SCP, the source path, which in this case is file.txt on my local machine, and the destination path, which is Bob's home directory on the remote machine given by this destination. If the remote machine had a name on the network, we could use that instead of its IP address. Notice that we are prompted for our password. This is the password on the remote machine. You can set up public key authentication to avoid entering a password if you want. If we look on the remote machine, we can see that the file has been copied. If we want to copy a directory and all its contents to a remote computer, we need to use the -r option like this. scp-r, the directory, files, and then the destination information. The R stands for recursive. We go to the remote machine, we can see that the directory and everything inside it has been copied. If instead we wanted to copy a file from the remote machine to my local machine, we can simply use the remote computer information in front of the source instead of the destination, like this. In this case, the source file is on a remote machine, and the destination is in the backup directory. We can also copy a directory and its contents from a remote machine to our current local machine. Just like when we copied a directory to a remote machine, we use the -r option. Notice that the directory and the files were copied. In all of these examples, we have been copying files between computers using accounts with the same username. If you need to use an account with a different username on the remote machine, you can provide that username before the hostname or IP address, like this. Remember that the password I entered was for the user account Sally on the remote machine. If I were to try and do it without specifying a user, I wouldn't be able to do it because I do not have permission as Bob to write to Sally's home directory. SCP is a great utility for copying a few files between machines, but there are times where you will need to copy many files. While you could always create a compressed archive of the files and copy it across the network, there are better options. One of those options is the rsync utility. Rsync is a very flexible tool. You can use it to copy files between hosts on a network or even to a different location on the same computer. The primary benefit of using rsync is that it computes the difference between source files and destination files and only transfers that difference. For example, if we back up a user's home directory to a remote computer daily and the user only modifies one file, rsync will only transfer that one file on the next backup since none of the other files were modified. Note that rsync was installed by default on my system, but you might need to install it on your system if you are using a different distribution. To copy a file from our computer to a remote computer, we can use the following command: rsync -avzh, the file to transfer, and then the destination. The flags are A for archive mode. This enables recursively copying directories and preserves things like user permissions and ownership. V for verbose mode. This isn't necessary, but it is sometimes helpful. Z for compressing file data as it is transferred. This is especially beneficial when transferring large files across the network. And -H for displaying output in human readable form. Just as with SCP, rsync can also transfer files from a remote computer to the local computer and recursively transfer entire directories. However, rsync offers more options that are particularly useful. To demonstrate what I previously mentioned about only copying files that have been changed, let's try again sending rsync or using rsync to send file 2 to the remote computer. Notice that fewer bytes were sent across the network. rsync compared the two files and determined they were the same. The savings weren't much considering the file is so small. But this gives you an idea how big the difference could be for large files. Let's look at some other options in rsync's man page. There's quite a bit here, so I'm going to skip down to some important points. The -E option lets us specify the shell used to transfer the file. One of the most common shells used is SSH. This allows the entire communication to be encrypted, just like when we used SCP. The --delete option will delete any files that exist at the destination, but not at the source. For example, if you delete a file in your home directory, rsync will delete the backup version of the file when it synchronizes the directories. The --progress option will print information describing the state of the transfer. This can be especially helpful if you are transferring multiple files. Lastly, if you have a complicated rsync command and want to test it before making any changes, use the dash dash dry run option. There are many more options that make rsync a valuable tool for a variety of situations. I recommend that you look through the documentation to get an idea of its capabilities.